skyjacking of D.B. Cooper. In the annals of unsolved crime, there are few figures who have captured the public imagination with more force than the man known as D.B. Cooper. He is not remembered for violence or for a string of nefarious deeds, but for a single, audacious act, a crime so perfectly planned and executed that it has become the stuff of modern American folklore. On a cold Thanksgiving Eve in 1971, a quiet, unassuming man in a business suit boarded a commercial airliner, committed a flawless crime, and then stepped out of the back of the plane and into legend, vanishing so completely that for over 50 years, no one has been able to determine his true identity or his ultimate fate. The story begins on the afternoon of November 24th, 1971, at Portland International Airport. It was a time before metal detectors and stringent security, an era when a person could walk up to a counter, pay cash for a ticket, and board a plane with little more than a glance. A man, described as being in his mid-40s, wearing a black business suit, a white shirt, and a black tie, approached the Northwest Orient Airlines counter. He purchased a one-way ticket to Seattle for $20. Giving the name Dan Cooper, he boarded Flight 3005, a Boeing sat down in seat 18C, lit a cigarette, and calmly ordered a bourbon and soda. For the first few minutes of the short flight, he appeared to be just another anonymous business traveler. Then, as the plane was airborne, he beckoned over a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner. He handed her a folded note. Schaffner, accustomed to businessmen making advances, simply slipped the note into her pocket, assuming it was a phone number. Cooper leaned closer and spoke quietly. "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Stunned, Schaffner read the note, written in neat, all-capital letters, which confirmed his claim. He then gestured for her to sit beside him and briefly opened his briefcase. Inside, she saw a baffling and terrifying collection of 8 red sticks connected by wires to a large battery, a device that looked exactly like a bomb. With a calm and polite demeanor that was noted by the entire crew, Cooper then stated his demands. He wanted $200,000 in unmarked $20 bills. He wanted 4 parachutes, specifically 2 primary civilian parachutes and 2 reserve parachutes, and he wanted a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the plane as soon as it landed. The specificity of his demands, especially regarding the parachutes, suggested he was not an amateur. He possessed a working knowledge of aviation and skydiving equipment. The crew relayed the demands to the ground, and the president of the airline, fearing for the passengers' lives, immediately authorized the full payment. For the next 2 hours, the plane circled Puget Sound, giving the authorities on the ground time to gather Cooper's demands. During this time, Cooper remained completely composed. He ordered a second bourbon, paid for it, and even tried to give the flight attendant the change. When the crew expressed concern about the delayed landing, he was reassuring, saying that there was no danger. Once he was informed that his demands had been met, he allowed the plane to land at Seattle-Tacoma Airport. The exchange on the tarmac was tense but smooth, the money delivered in a heavy knapsack, and the parachutes were brought aboard the plane by a single airline employee. In return, Cooper, true to his word, allowed all 36 passengers and 2 of the flight attendants, including Florence Schaffner, to deplane. He kept a skeleton crew on board, the pilot, the co-pilot, a flight engineer, and 1 flight attendant. While the plane was being refueled, Cooper outlined the second and most mysterious part of his plan to the pilots. They were to fly towards Mexico City, but on a very specific flight path. He instructed them to fly at a low altitude of 10,000 feet, at the slowest possible airspeed without stalling, around 115 miles per hour. He also demanded that the landing gear remain down and the wing flaps be set to 15 degrees, a configuration that would ensure the plane flew slowly and low. His most critical demand, and the key to his entire plan, concerned the unique design of the Boeing 727. He ordered the pilots to keep the rear-aft air stair of the plane, a retractable staircase at the tail of the aircraft, unlocked and unsealed. At approximately 7:40 p.m., the refueled plane took off from Seattle, heading south into a dark and stormy night. Two fighter jets from a nearby Air Force base were scrambled to tail the airliner, but due to the poor visibility and the 727's slow speed, they quickly lost sight of it. Sometime after 8 Heron Humpele, in the pitch-black sky, somewhere between Seattle, Washington, and Reno, Nevada, the cockpit crew noticed an indicator light showing that the aft air stair had been opened. Over the intercom, they asked Cooper if he needed any assistance. He responded with his last known words, a calm and simple "No." That was the last the crew ever heard from him. In the middle of a raging storm, with winds whipping past at nearly 200 miles per hour, and the temperature well below freezing, Dan Cooper walked down the rear stairs of a commercial airliner, and with a bag of money strapped to his body, parachuted into the vast, rugged wilderness of southwestern Washington state. The investigation that followed was one of the most extensive and expensive in FBI history. The name D.B. Cooper became a household name due to a journalistic error when a reporter misidentified an early cleared suspect. The FBI investigated thousands of potential leads, but never found the man. The central question was a simple one. Could anyone have survived such a jump? The FBI has long maintained that Cooper was likely an amateur who grievously underestimated the danger. They believe he perished in the jump, his body and the money lost forever in the dense, unforgiving wilderness. For 9 years, it seemed that no trace of the skyjacker would ever be found. Then in 1980, a young boy named Brian Ingram was digging a fire pit on a sandy stretch of the Columbia River known as Tenor Bar, about 20 miles southwest of the probable jump zone. His hands uncovered 3 rotting bundles of cash. When authorities examined the money, they got a stunning confirmation. The serial numbers were a perfect match for the Cooper ransom money, but this discovery only deepened the mystery. The money was far from where Cooper was thought to have landed. An analysis of the river's currents suggested the bundles had not simply washed downstream. How did $5,800 of the ransom money end up buried on that specific sandbar? The D.B. Cooper case was officially closed by the FBI in 2016, its 45-year investigation ending without a definitive conclusion. The theories remain: did he perish in the wilderness, a victim of his own audacious plan, as the FBI believes? Or was he an experienced paratrooper, perhaps a disillusioned veteran, who knew exactly what he was doing, survived the jump, and had an accomplice on the ground waiting for him? If he survived, why was a small portion of the money found years later? Was it lost during the jump, or was it planted as a deliberate piece of misdirection? D.B. Cooper has become more than a criminal. He is an American folk hero, a symbol of rebellion, who committed a perfect crime and simply stepped out of existence. Did he fall to his end in the dark woods of Washington, or did he escape to a quiet life, occasionally paying for a drink with a $20 bill from a long-ago flight? The answer, it seems, vanished with him into the stormy night. The Dyatlov Pass incident. There are stories of nature's unforgiving power, of mountaineers who succumb to blizzards or the simple, brutal cold of the wilderness. But the story of the Dyatlov Pass incident is not one of them. It is a tale of 9 experienced, highly competent hikers who ventured into the Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union in the winter of 1959 and met an end so bizarre, so terrifying, and so utterly inexplicable that it defies all rational explanation. Their demise was not a simple tragedy. It was a complex and chilling puzzle, a final, silent scene that has become one of the most enduring and disturbing mysteries of the 20th century. The group was made up of students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, all of them certified Grade 2 hikers with extensive skiing and mountaineering experience. Led by the 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, they were embarking on an ambitious expedition to reach a mountain named Otartan, a difficult but achievable goal for a group of their skill level. The early days of their journey are well documented through the diaries and photographs they kept, which were later recovered from their final campsite. The images paint a picture of a happy, confident, and capable group laughing and trekking through the vast, snow-covered landscapes, fully prepared for the challenges ahead. On February 1st, they began their ascent of a mountain known by the local Mansi people as Kholat Sakol, a name that ominously translates to Dead Mountain. Due to worsening weather conditions, they deviated from their planned route and set up their final camp on the mountain's exposed eastern slope. It was a slightly unusual choice, as a forested area just a mile away would have offered more shelter, but it was not a critical error for a group of their expertise. From this camp, they were poised to make their final push to their destination. They set up their large tent, ate a meal, and settled in for the night. It was the last normal thing any of them would ever do. When the group failed to send a telegram by their scheduled return date of February 12th, a search and rescue operation was launched. On February 26th, a search party discovered the group's abandoned campsite, and the mystery began. The tent was half buried in snow and badly damaged, but the most unsettling detail was that it had been sliced and torn open from the inside. It was the unmistakable act of people in a desperate hurry to escape their only shelter. Inside the tent, all of the group's belongings, including their boots, warm coats, backpacks, and food, were found neatly arranged, a silent testament to the suddenness of their departure. Leading away from the tent was a single trail of footprints in the snow. The tracks of 8 or 9 individuals descended the slope in a relatively orderly line, suggesting they had left together, not scattering in a wild panic. But the footprints told a terrifying story. They had been made by people who were either barefoot, wearing only socks, or in a single boot, in temperatures that were a deadly 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. This is the central, unanswerable question of the Dyatlov Pass incident. What could possibly terrify 9 seasoned mountaineers so much that they would deliberately cut their way out of their tent and flee, half-dressed, into a lethal subarctic night? The trail of footprints led the searchers down the slope for nearly a mile, towards the edge of a forest. There, under a large cedar tree, they found the first 2 members of the group, Yuri Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko. The 2 men were dressed only in their underwear, and their hands were raw and abraded, as if they had been trying to climb the tree. The remains of a small campfire were nearby. The branches of the cedar tree above them were broken up to a height of 5 meters, suggesting someone had climbed it, perhaps to get a better view of the tent, or to see what had driven them away. 3 more hikers, including Igor Dyatlov himself, were found at intervals between the cedar tree and the abandoned tent. Their positions suggested they had been attempting a desperate crawl back up the slope to the safety of their shelter. The official cause of their passing was ruled as hypothermia. At first, this seemed like a tragic but understandable conclusion. A group of hikers had gotten lost in the dark and frozen. But this neat explanation would be shattered 2 months later with one final grim discovery. In May, after the snow had begun to melt, the remains of the final 4 hikers were found, buried under 15 feet of snow in a ravine, deeper in the woods. These 4 were better dressed than the others, some of them wearing the clothes of their fallen comrades, suggesting a desperate attempt at survival. But it was the nature of their condition that turned this case from a tragedy into a high strangeness event. One of them, Nicolas Thibault-Brignol, had suffered a massive skull fracture. 2 others, Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov, had major chest fractures. The medical examiner stated that the force required to cause such damage was equivalent to the impact of a major car crash. And yet, critically, their bodies showed no corresponding external injuries, no bruising, no soft tissue damage. It was as if they had been crushed by an immense, uniform pressure. And the final, bizarre details only deepened the enigma. Lyudmila Dubinina was found to be missing her tongue, her eyes, and part of the tissue from her lips, and perhaps most inexplicably of all, when the clothing worn by this final group was tested, some of it was found to contain significant levels of beta radiation. The official Soviet investigation was abruptly closed in May of 1959, with the final report stating that the hikers had perished as a result of a compelling unknown force. For over 60 years, theories have raged. The leading conventional explanation is that the group was the victim of a slab avalanche, a rare event where a large plate of snow slides down the slope. This could explain the crushing injuries on the final fall and could have forced the others to cut their way out of the tent in a panic. In the disorienting darkness and blizzard conditions, they would have become separated and succumbed to the cold. But experienced mountaineers have argued against this, pointing out that the tent was not deeply buried, the footprints were still visible, and the hiker's trail was not consistent with the chaotic scattering of avalanche survivors. Another prominent theory points to a secret Soviet weapons test. The area could have been a testing ground for a concussion bomb or a radiological weapon, which would explain both the crushing internal injuries without external signs and the radiation found on the clothing. The hikers could have been unfortunate witnesses who were either deliberately eliminated or fled in terror from a terrifying blast. This theory is bolstered by reports from other groups in the region who saw strange glowing orange spheres in the sky. On the same night, the hikers perished, which has also fueled paranormal and UFO-related theories. In the end, every explanation seems to fall short. Paradoxical undressing can explain why some were found without clothes, and infrasound created by wind could explain a sudden irrational panic. But no single theory can account for all the bizarre and conflicting evidence: the orderly retreat from the tent, the crushing yet invisible injuries, the missing tongue, and the radiation. The slopes of Dead Mountain continue to hold their secrets, a story written in a single silent trail of barefoot prints in the snow, a testament to 9 lives ended by a force that remains utterly and terrifyingly unknown. The Lost Army of Cambyses. History is filled with the stories of great armies, of epic battles and glorious conquests that decided the fate of empires. But some of the most haunting military tales are not of victory or defeat, but of a profound and total silence. This is one such story, a 500-year-old mystery that comes to us from the writings of the ancient Greek historian Herodotus, the father of history. It is the epic tale of a colossal Persian army, 50,000 soldiers strong, that marched into the unforgiving Egyptian desert to destroy a sacred oracle and was never seen again. Our story begins in the year 5285 BC, at the height of the mighty Achaemenid Empire of Persia. The Persian king, Cambyses II, son of the legendary Cyrus the Great, had just achieved his crowning ambition, the conquest of Egypt, a prize that had eluded even his famous father. But according to Herodotus, Cambyses was not a benevolent ruler. He was a man of great pride and a fearsome temper, driven to secure his legacy through absolute domination. After his victory, he devised a grand, 3-pronged military campaign to solidify his power. He would lead one force south to conquer the kingdom of Kush, send another west towards Carthage, and dispatch a third to deal with a troublesome religious center in the heart of the western desert. This third mission is the one that has been lost to legend. Its target was the Siwa Oasis, home to the incredibly sacred and respected Oracle of Ammon, an institution whose priests had failed to legitimize Cambyses' rule over Egypt. Enraged by this defiance, Cambyses sent a force of elite soldiers on a punitive expedition. Their mission was not just to subdue the oasis, but according to Herodotus, to utterly destroy the temple and its priests, an act of supreme hubris against the gods of his new subject. The army assembled at the city of Thebes and began its long march. Their journey first took them to the Karg Oasis, the southernmost of the major Egyptian oases, where they rested and resupplied. This part of the story is historically and logistically plausible. From there, they set out into the vast, featureless expanse of the Great Sand Sea, a deadly stretch of desert that separated them from their target. At Siwa, they were never heard from again. According to the account Herodotus heard from the Egyptian locals, the army had completed 7 days of their march from Karga and had reached a point somewhere in the middle of the desert. It was there that a great and terrible wind rose up from the south, a violent, suffocating sandstorm known as a simoon. The storm was of unprecedented ferocity. churning the desert into immense, deadly waves of sand. As Herodotus wrote, the entire army was overwhelmed by the tempest, buried beneath the dunes, and utterly disappeared. Not a single soldier, not a single piece of armor, not a single survivor returned to tell the tale. The 50,000-man army had been erased from the face of the earth. For centuries, this dramatic story has captivated historians and explorers, but it is also the subject of intense debate. The central question is a simple one: did it actually happen? Many modern historians and Egyptologists are deeply skeptical and believe the story is not a historical account, but a brilliant piece of ancient propaganda. Herodotus, they argue, was known to record compelling stories and rumors alongside historical fact, and the tale of the lost army could have been a cautionary fable created by Egyptian priests. It was a powerful moral lesson, a story designed to show what happens to an impious foreign king who dares to challenge the power of the Egyptian gods. The desert itself became the instrument of divine retribution. The arguments for this theory are strong. First, there is the sheer logistical implausibility of the event. Supplying an army of 50,000 men with enough food and water to cross that specific stretch of desert would have been a near impossible task, even for the well-organized Persian army. Second, and more damning, is the complete lack of any other historical source mentioning the event. The loss of 50,000 soldiers would have been a catastrophic military disaster for the Persian Empire, a blow so significant it would surely have been recorded in Persian, Babylonian, or other Greek texts, yet only Herodotus tells the story. This has led to a second major theory, that the story is based on a real event, but one that was greatly exaggerated over time. Perhaps the army was not 50,000 strong, but a much smaller detachment of 5,000, or even 2,000 men. The loss of a smaller force, while tragic, might not have been significant enough to be recorded in the official histories of the Persian Empire. Their demise may also have been less dramatic than a single, cataclysmic sandstorm. The army could have simply gotten lost, their guides betraying them or perishing, leading the soldiers to wander until they succumbed to dehydration and the brutal heat of the desert. The sandstorm, in this version, was not the weapon, but merely the final event that covered the remains of an army that had already perished. For thousands of years, the story remained a legend, with countless adventurers and archaeologists dreaming of finding the remains of the lost army. In recent decades, several teams have claimed to have found evidence, most notably a pair of Italian archaeologists, the brothers Angelo and Alfredo Castiglioni, who announced in 2009 that they had discovered human remains and Persian-era bronze weapons and silver bracelets in the desert near Siwa. However, their claims have been met with significant skepticism from the mainstream archaeological community, which has noted the lack of official, peer-reviewed evidence and the possibility that the artifacts could be from a different time period entirely. The lost army of Cambyse continues to exist in the fascinating space between history and myth. Was it a real military catastrophe, a testament to the unforgiving power of the desert and the hubris of a king? Or was it a clever cautionary tale, an ancient ghost story crafted to warn the powerful against challenging the gods, until a definitive piece of a Persian shield or a soldier's skeleton is pulled from the deep and shifting sands? The 50,000 men of Cambyse's army will continue their silent march, not through the desert, but through the pages of legend, one of history's greatest and most epic unsolved mysteries, the ghost ship, Mary Celeste. The annals of the sea are filled with tales of mermaids, monsters, and great leviathans, but no story has haunted the maritime world with more persistent and chilling power than that of the ghost ship, a vessel found adrift and under full sail. Its decks, eerily silent, its entire crew having vanished without a trace. Of all these tales, one name stands above all others as the archetypal example of this profound mystery, a ship whose story has become synonymous with the inexplicable. This is the legend of the Mary Celeste. Our story begins in the vast, lonely expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. On the afternoon of December 4th, 1872, the crew of a Canadian brigantine, the Des Gretiers, captained by David Morehouse, spotted another vessel sailing erratically about halfway between the Azores and the coast of Portugal. The ship's sails were in disarray, some torn and others missing entirely, and she was yawing strangely in the wind, as if no one was at the helm. As they drew closer, Captain Morehouse was struck by a sense of familiarity. He recognized the ship as the Marie Celeste, an American vessel that had left New York City 8 days before his own ship, and whose captain, Benjamin Spooner Briggs, was a personal acquaintance. Concerned, Morehouse hailed the ship, but received no reply. For 2 hours, they watched the vessel drift, a silent, wounded thing on the open ocean. Finally, he sent his first mate, Oliver DeVoe, and 2 other sailors in a small boat to investigate. As they drew alongside the Mary Celeste and climbed aboard, they were met with a profound and unnerving silence. The ship was completely deserted. There was no sign of Captain Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, or any of the 7 experienced crewmen. All 10 souls who had sailed on the ship were gone. The scene they discovered on board was a bizarre and contradictory puzzle. On one hand, the ship was in a generally sound, seaworthy condition. Her cargo of over 1,700 barrels of denatured alcohol, destined for Genoa, was almost entirely intact and undisturbed. In the crew's quarters, their sea chests were tidy, containing their clothes, tobacco pipes, and even money. In the captain's cabin, his wife's sewing machine had a piece of unfinished work still in it, and his daughter's toys were scattered about. A 6-month supply of food and water was still stored in the hold. The scene was one of a perfectly normal life at sea, a life that had been abruptly and inexplicably interrupted. But there were also signs of trouble and a hasty departure. The ship's only lifeboat, a small yawl, was missing, suggesting the crew had deliberately abandoned the vessel. The ship's logbook was found, but its final entry was dated 10 days prior, on the morning of November 2, and it noted no signs of distress or unusual events. The ship's chronometer, sextant, and registration papers were also missing, crucial navigational instruments that a captain would only take in an emergency. There was several feet of water in the ship's hold, and one of the 2 bilge pumps had been disassembled on the deck, as if for repairs. Yet, the ship was far from sinking. The crew of the Des Gretiers made the difficult decision to split their numbers and sail the abandoned vessel to Gibraltar to claim the salvage rights. It was here that the mystery deepened. The official Admiralty Court inquiry was led by a deeply suspicious Attorney General named Frederick Solly Flood, who was convinced that a terrible crime had been committed. He suspected that the crew of the Des Gretiers had perhaps encountered the Mary Celeste, ended the lives of everyone on board, and then fabricated the ghost ship story to claim the valuable salvage reward. He pointed to what he claimed were traces of a struggle and stains on a sword found in the captain's cabin, but these were later found to be nothing more than rust and minor damage from the sea. Ultimately, the court could find no evidence of foul play and reluctantly awarded the salvagers their payment. But the mystery of what happened to the 10 people aboard the Mary Celeste was just beginning. Theories have raged for over 150 years. The most obvious, foul play, seems the least likely. A mutiny by the crew would not explain why they would abandon a perfectly good ship in the middle of the Atlantic, and an attack by pirates makes no sense, as the valuable cargo and the personal belongings of the crew were all left behind. Other, more imaginative theories have been proposed, from an attack by a giant squid or sea monster to the crew being abducted by aliens. The writer Arthur Conan Doyle, before he created Sherlock Holmes, wrote a popular short story based on the incidents which sensationalized the discovery and added fictional details that have stuck in the public imagination. But the most plausible and widely accepted explanation is a far more subtle and tragic story of a simple precaution gone horribly wrong. This is the explosive cargo theory. The ship was carrying industrial alcohol, which is highly volatile. It is believed that alcohol vapor may have leaked from some of the barrels, 9 of which were found to be empty and were made of a more porous type of oak. This vapor could have built up in the hold, making strange rumbling sounds and creating the fear of an imminent, catastrophic explosion. Captain Briggs, a responsible and cautious man, with his wife and child on board, may have made the decision to order a temporary, precautionary evacuation. In this scenario, he would have ordered the crew to launch the lifeboat, taking with them the essential navigational instruments and ship's papers. They would have then attached a long tow line, likely the ship's main halyard, to the Mary Celeste, intending to wait at a safe distance until the perceived danger had passed. But something went wrong. A sudden gust of wind could have filled the ship's sails, causing it to surge forward and snap the tow line, or the line could have simply come undone. The crew would have been left in their tiny, fragile lifeboat, watching in horror as their perfectly sound and empty ship sailed away from them, leaving them stranded and alone in the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean, where they would have eventually been lost to a storm or starvation. This theory elegantly accounts for almost all of the strange evidence: the missing lifeboat, the abandoned but undamaged ship, the missing navigational instruments, and the lack of any struggle. While we can never be certain, it provides a logical and deeply human explanation for the mystery. In the end, the Mary Celeste became the ultimate ghost ship, a powerful symbol of the ocean's ability to swallow lives and keep its own counsel. The ship sailed on, but the 10 souls who called it home for its final voyage simply vanished. Their last moments, a profound and enduring secret of the sea, the enigma of the Nazca Lines. In the hyper-arid coastal plain of southern Peru lies one of the driest and most desolate places on the face of the earth. A vast, rust-colored canvas of sand and stone that receives less than an inch of rain per year. It is on this stark and seemingly empty landscape that a vanished culture left behind one of history's most stunning and perplexing works of art. A sprawling gallery of gigantic drawings and geometric shapes etched into the desert floor. These are the Nazca Lines, geoglyphs so enormous in scale that their true form can only be fully appreciated from high in the sky, a silent, mysterious message from a people who left no written word. The lines were created by the Nazca culture, a pre-Incan society that flourished in the region from around 100 BC to 800 AD. Their method for creating these massive drawings was remarkably simple, yet effective. The desert floor is covered in a layer of reddish-brown, iron oxide-coated pebbles, and by carefully removing this dark top layer, the Nazca people exposed the lighter-colored, sandy earth beneath, creating a stark and lasting contrast. In any other climates, these shallow etchings would have been erased by wind and rain in a matter of years, but the unique, windless, and intensely dry conditions of the Nazca Plateau have preserved them almost perfectly for nearly 2 millennia. The scale and scope of their work are breathtaking. Spread across nearly 200 square miles of desert are hundreds of individual figures, ranging from simple, perfectly straight lines that run for miles over hills and valleys, to complex and stylized drawings of animals and plants. The most famous of these are the biomorphs, massive depictions of the natural world. There is a hummingbird, its wings frozen in mid-flap, a spider with precise anatomical detail, a monkey with a strange, spiraling tail, a majestic condor with a wingspan of over 400 feet, a whale, a lizard, and a host of other creatures. There is even a strange, humanoid figure with large owl-like eyes, standing on a hillside and waving, a figure that modern observers have nicknamed the astronaut. But these famous animal figures, as stunning as they are, make up only a small fraction of the geoglyphs. The vast majority of the Nazca lines are geometric shapes, thousands of perfectly straight lines, some over 30 miles long, as well as massive trapezoids, rectangles, triangles, and spirals. These lines were created with an incredible precision that has baffled researchers, a testament to the sophisticated understanding of geometry and surveying possessed by their creators. Though known to the local Peruvian people for centuries, the lines were only brought to the world's attention in the 1930s, With the rise of commercial aviation in the region, pilots flying between Lima and Arequipa were the first to see the full, breathtaking scope of the designs, a secret gallery hidden in plain sight. This only visible from the sky aspect became the central and most compelling part of their mystery. If the people who made them could not see their own finished work, then for whom were they intended? For decades, scholars have debated the purpose of these colossal drawings. The first major scientific theory was proposed by Maria Rieker, a German mathematician and archaeologist who dedicated over 50 years of her life to studying and preserving the lines. She was their fierce guardian and most passionate advocate. Rieker believed that the lines functioned as a massive astronomical observatory, a calendar etched onto the earth. She proposed that many of the straight lines aligned with the rising and setting of the sun, the moon, and key stars during important celestial events, like the solstices. In her view, the lines were a tool to track the changing seasons, a vital guide for the Nazca's agricultural cycle. While some of Rieker's astronomical alignments have been confirmed, later research has shown that the vast majority of the lines do not point to any significant celestial target, leading most modern archaeologists to seek another explanation. Today, the leading theory connects the lines to the Nazca people's most vital and scarce resource, water. In one of the driest places on Earth, the quest for water was a matter of life and death, and it dominated their spiritual world. This theory suggests the lines were not meant to be seen from above, by humans, but were created to be walked upon as giant, ceremonial pathways for religious processions and ritual. The animal figures, like the hummingbird, spider, and monkey, are all known symbols of water, fertility, and the heavens in Indian cultures. It's believed that Nazca shamans and priests would lead their people in ritual walks along these massive lines, their processions, a form of prayer and a way to commune with their mountain and sky gods, a petition for life-giving rain. This theory is supported by archaeological discoveries of broken pottery and other ritual offerings at the intersections of many of the lines, suggesting they were active sites of ceremonial importance. They were not a map of the stars, but a map of their faith, a sacred landscape designed for divine interaction. Of course, a mystery this grand has attracted more sensational explanations. The most famous of these was popularized in the 1960s by the author Erich von Däniken, who proposed that the Nazca lines were built under the direction of ancient alien visitors. In his view, the long, straight lines were nothing less than giant runways for alien spacecraft, a landing strip in the desert for extraterrestrial gods. While this theory has captured the public imagination, it is completely unsupported by any scientific or archaeological evidence, and the soft desert floor could never support the weight of any real aircraft. In the end, the Nazca lines are a stunning testament to the ingenuity and deep spiritual life of a lost culture. While the idea of alien runways is a captivating piece of fiction, the likely truth is something far more profound. They are a sacred text written on the landscape, a monumental plea for survival, etched into the surface of the earth. They were not made for us to see from planes, but for their gods to see from the heavens, and for their people to walk upon in faith, leaving behind a beautiful and silent enigma for the ages. The identity of Lori Erica Ruff. We often believe that we know the people closest to us, our partners, our family, the ones with whom we share our lives. But the story of Lori Erica Ruff is a chilling and deeply tragic reminder that sometimes a person's entire life can be a carefully constructed fiction, a facade designed to hide a past so dark or so painful that it must be completely erased. This is not a story of a disappearance, but of an appearance, the mystery of a woman who seemingly created herself out of thin air, and whose true identity would only be discovered after her final, desperate act. In 2003, a man named Blake Ruff, a member of a loving and well-established family in East Texas, met a woman who called herself Lori Erica Kennedy. She was intelligent, accomplished, and intensely private. She told Blake that she had come from a difficult background in Arizona, that both of her parents were deceased, and that she had no siblings or living relatives. While her extreme secrecy about her past was unusual, the Ruff family accepted her story, respecting her desire for privacy and welcoming her into their lives. From the outside, she was a woman with a clean slate, a person with no history to speak of. In 2004, Blake and Laurie were married, and for a few years they lived a relatively normal life. The first serious cracks in Laurie's carefully constructed world began to appear after the birth of their daughter in 2008. She became obsessively, almost pathologically protective of the child, refusing to let anyone, even Blake's mother, hold her for more than a few moments. She would go to extreme lengths to prevent the Ruff family from spending time with their granddaughter, and her behavior grew increasingly erratic and reclusive. The strain on the marriage became immense, and in 2010, after years of this strange and isolating behavior, Blake filed for divorce and moved back in with his parents. On Christmas Eve of 2010, after a period of escalating distress, the woman known as Laurie Erica Ruff drove to the home of her former in-laws, and in the driveway she ended her own life. It was a profound tragedy, but it was what she left behind that would transform her sad story into a deep and perplexing mystery. As the Ruff family was sorting through her belongings, they found a locked metal box in her closet, a box she had always been intensely secretive about, telling Blake that he was to never ever open it. Racked with grief but needing answers, Blake's father, Denny, pried the box open. What they found inside was not a collection of keepsakes, but the ghost of a meticulously planned deception. There was a series of identification documents bearing several different names. There was the birth certificate of a 2-year-old girl from Washington State named Becky Sue Turner, who had perished in a house fire in 1971. And there was a legal document from Idaho dated 1988, showing that a woman using Becky Sue Turner's identity had successfully petitioned the court to legally change her name to Laurie Erica Kennedy. The box contained a paper trail that documented the creation of a new person, from the theft of a dead child's identity to the acquisition of a GED to an application to the University of Arizona. Critically, there was nothing in the box that predated 1988. No photographs, no letters, no high school yearbook, nothing to suggest who she was before she became Becky Sue Turner. The woman Blake Ruff had married, the mother of his child, was a complete unknown, a phantom who had stolen a life from a grave. The case was a genealogical cold case, a puzzle of identity that was eventually taken on by a Social Security Administration investigator named Joe Velling. It was Velling who confirmed the entire story, that Laurie had used the birth certificate of a real deceased child to obtain an ID card in Idaho, a common method for creating a new identity in the pre-digital age. From there, she had built her new life, layer by layer, until she became Laurie Erica Ruff. But the central question remained: why would someone go to such extraordinary lengths to erase their past? What was she running from? The theories were varied and compelling. The most obvious explanation was that she was a fugitive, on the run from a serious crime committed in her youth. A new identity would have been the only way to escape justice, a theory supported by the sheer professionalism of her identity theft. Another theory suggested she was an escapee from an abusive and controlling cult. Her paranoia and her fierce, almost possessive, protection of her daughter, seen as the lingering trauma of a life of indoctrination. But the theory favored by the Ruff family themselves was a more personal and tragic one. They believed she was running from a deeply abusive family or a violent relationship, and that creating a new identity was her only way to escape a past that was too painful to live with. For years, the mystery of her true name remained unsolved. The breakthrough finally came through the work of a forensic genealogist named Colleen Fitzpatrick. Using a DNA sample from Laurie's daughter, Fitzpatrick was able to slowly and painstakingly build a family tree, searching for relatives who might have had a missing female member. In 2016, she found a potential match with a family from Pennsylvania, the Cassidys, who had a relative that had vanished decades earlier. When Velling and the Ruff family made contact, The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. The family confirmed that their daughter, Kimberly McLean, a bright but rebellious high school student, had left home in 1986 at the age of 17. After a difficult relationship with her mother and stepfather, she told her family never to look for her, and she kept that promise. Kimberly McLean was Laurie Erica Ruff. The mystery of who she was finally solved. But even with a name, the deeper mystery of why remains. Was her family situation so dire, so traumatic, that it required a complete and total reinvention of self, a psychological escape so profound that she could never allow anyone from her new life to glimpse the truth of her old one? The case of Laurie Erica Ruff is a profound and heartbreaking story about the immense weight of the past and the desperate lengths one person will go to in order to outrun it. It is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest mysteries are not what happened to a person, but who they truly were. The Mothman of Point Pleasant. There are times and places in our world that seem to become magnets for the strange, finite periods, when the veil between our reality and something else grows thin, and the bizarre and the inexplicable bleed through. For 13 months, between November of 1966 and December of 1967, quiet town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, became one of those places. It was a period that saw an explosion of strange lights in the sky, reports of odd garbled phone calls, and visits from mysterious men in black. But at the heart of it all was a single terrifying figure, a creature that would become a legend, a winged, red-eyed entity that is remembered today as the Mothman. The story begins on a cold, moonless night, on November 15th, 1966. Two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry, and Steve and Mary Mallet, were driving aimlessly through a place known locally as the TNT area, a sprawling, derelict munitions plant from World War II. It was a place of decaying concrete domes and dark, overgrown roads, a perfect backdrop for a horror story. As their car passed one of the old generator plants, their headlights caught something that froze them in their seats. Standing by the side of the road was a figure that was, in their words, shaped like a man, but bigger. It was 6 to 7 feet tall, with large bat-like wings folded against its back. But its most terrifying feature was its eyes, two enormous, hypnotic, glowing red orbs. As the terrified couples sped away, the creature reportedly unfolded its massive wings and took to the air, easily keeping pace with their car, even as they pushed it to speeds of over 100 miles per hour. They said it didn't seem to flap its wings, but glided effortlessly, its red eyes fixed on them, its flight accompanied by a strange, high-pitched sound, like a giant mouse squeaking. They drove straight to the police station, in a state of pure panic, their story so filled with genuine terror that the responding deputy, Mellard Halstead, noted, "I've known these kids all their lives. They'd never been in any trouble, and they were really scared. I took them seriously." When their story was published in the local newspaper, it opened the floodgates. What could have been an isolated, strange sighting turned into a full-blown flap. Over the next 13 months, more than 100 people in and around Point Pleasant would report seeing the same, or a similar creature. The descriptions were remarkably consistent. A tall, man-like figure with a 10-foot wingspan and two huge, glowing red eyes. It was often seen near the TNT area or flying over the Ohio River, and it seemed to instill a sense of primal, inexplicable fear in all who witnessed it. The local press, inspired by the popular Batman television series of the time, gave the creature its now famous name, the Mothman. As the sightings continued, so too did other strange phenomena. Residents reported seeing strange lights in the sky, classic UFOs, that would hover silently or zip away at impossible speeds. Some witnesses claimed to have been visited by unsettling men in black, strange, unsmiling figures in dark suits who would ask questions about their sightings and subtly intimidate them into silence. It was as if the Mothman was not an isolated monster, but the centerpiece of a much wider, high-strangeness event that had descended upon the entire region. The sightings and the strange events continued for just over a year, And then, on December 15th, 1967, the story took a dark and tragic turn. During the evening rush hour, the Silver Bridge, a major artery connecting Point Pleasant, West Virginia to Gallipolis, Ohio, suddenly and catastrophically collapsed into the icy waters of the Ohio River. The disaster was immense, and 46 people lost their lives. It was a moment of profound shock and grief for the small community. In the immediate aftermath of the tragedy, a strange realization dawned on the residents of Point Pleasant. From the day the bridge collapsed, the Mothman sightings completely and abruptly stopped. The creature, which had been a constant, terrifying presence for 13 months, was suddenly gone. This gave birth to the most enduring part of the Mothman legend, the idea that the creature was not a monster bent on terrorizing the populace, but a supernatural harbinger of doom, an omen that had been trying, in its own terrifying way, to warn the people of the impending disaster. Some witnesses even came forward claiming to have seen the creature near or on the bridge in the days and hours leading up to its collapse. So, what was the truth behind the Mothman of Point Pleasant? The most straightforward, skeptical explanation is one of simple misidentification. Proponents of this theory argue that all of the sightings were of a known large bird, most likely a sandhill crane or a great horned owl. A sandhill crane can stand nearly as tall as a man, has a massive wingspan, and possesses a patch of reddish coloring around its eyes. A great horned owl, when caught in headlights, has eyes that can reflect light with a brilliant red glow, and it can appear unnervingly large and dark in a fleeting, panicked sighting. The other leading explanation, the one popularized by the author and paranormal investigator John Keel in his famous book, The Mothman Prophecies, is that the creature was a genuine paranormal entity. Keel, who was in Point Pleasant investigating the events as they happened, believed that the Mothman and the associated UFOs and men in black were ultra-terrestrials, beings from another dimension or a coexisting reality that were drawn to the area by the energy of the impending disaster. In his view, the Mothman was not a cause of the tragedy, but a symptom of it, a supernatural being drawn to a window of future trauma. The official cause of the Silver Bridge collapse was eventually determined to be a simple, tragic case of engineering failure, a microscopic stress crack in a single eye-bar link that had failed under the weight of traffic. But for the people of Point Pleasant and for the world of paranormal folklore, the explanation was never so simple. Was the Mothman a misidentified bird, its legend amplified by mass hysteria in a small, close-knit town? Or was it a real, supernatural entity, a dark angel whose glowing red eyes were a final, desperate warning of a tragedy to come? The winged figure vanished after the disaster, leaving behind a powerful and enduring piece of American folklore, a story that forever links a terrifying creature to a tragic premonition. The Princes in the Tower. The Tower of London is a place of deep and often dark history, a stone fortress that has stood for nearly 1,000 years as a symbol of English power. It has been a royal palace, a treasury, an armory, and most famously, a prison. Its walls have held kings, queens, and traitors, but of all the secrets it has kept, none is more tragic or more enduring than the story of two young boys, a king and his brother, who in the 15th century walked through its gates and vanished forever from the historical record. This is the mystery of the Princes in the Tower. Our story is set in the year 1483, a time of immense political turmoil. In England, at the tail end of the brutal civil conflicts known as the Wars of the Roses, the Yorkist king, Edward IV, a powerful and charismatic ruler, passed away suddenly, leaving the throne to his eldest son, also named Edward. The new King Edward V was just 12 years old. His younger brother, Richard of Shrewsbury, Duke of York, was only 9. In a kingdom where power was precarious, the ascension of a child king created a dangerous vacuum, and into that vacuum stepped the boy's uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. Richard was the late king's younger brother, a loyal and accomplished military commander, and he was named in his brother's will as the Lord Protector of the realm. His sacred duty was to govern England and protect his young nephew until Edward V was old enough to rule in his own right. But Richard, it seems, had his own ambitions. He swiftly intercepted the young King Edward on his journey to London for his coronation, arresting the boy's protectors and taking personal custody of his nephew. He then escorted the young king to the Tower of London, which, at the time, was not just a prison, but also a traditional royal residence, a conventional place for a monarch to stay before being crowned. With the rightful king now securely under his control, Richard made his next move. He approached his sister-in-law, the Queen Dowager, Elizabeth Woodville, who had fled with her younger son, Prince Richard, into the sanctuary of Westminster Abbey. He persuaded her, through a mixture of promises and threats, that the young prince should join his brother in the Tower, supposedly to keep him company and prepare for the coronation. With great reluctance, she agreed, and the 9-year-old prince was delivered into his uncle's care. Now, both of the male heirs of King Edward IV, the two boys who stood between Richard and the throne, were locked away within the fortress he controlled. It was at this point that the two princes began their slow fade from history. In the early summer of 1483, they were occasionally seen playing in the gardens of the Tower, but as the weeks went on, their appearances became less frequent, until they were not seen at all. While the boys were hidden from public view, their uncle Richard made a stunning political maneuver. He had a loyal clergyman deliver a sermon declaring that his late brother, King Edward IV, had been previously contracted to marry another woman before he wed Elizabeth Woodville. This, he argued, made the marriage illegitimate, and therefore all of their children, including the two princes, were illegitimate and had no claim to the throne. This claim was quickly formalized in an Act of Parliament known as the Titulus Regius, with the boys officially barred from the line of succession. Richard, Duke of Gloucester, as the only legitimate living heir, was offered the crown. He was crowned King Richard III on July 6th, and sometime after that summer, the two young princes in the Tower vanished completely. Their ultimate fate remains one of England's greatest and most contentious historical mysteries. For over 500 years, the dominant theory has been that the princes were taken from their beds and their lives were ended on the direct orders of their uncle, King Richard III. He had the motive, opportunity, and the means to secure his own shaky claim to the throne. He needed to eliminate the two boys who would always be seen by his enemies as the true and rightful heirs. This version of events was heavily promoted by the Tudor dynasty, which defeated Richard in battle just 2 years later, and was immortalized by William Shakespeare, whose brilliant play, Richard III, cemented the king's reputation as a ruthless and villainous tyrant for all time. The Tudor-era historian Sir Thomas More even provided a detailed account, claiming Richard had hired 2 men to carry out the deed in the dead of night. But is the story that simple? Over the centuries, revisionist historians, known as Ricardians, have argued that Richard III may have been the victim of a masterful smear campaign. They point to other suspects who also had a motive. One is Henry Stafford, the Duke of Buckingham, Richard's ambitious right-hand man, who helped him seize the throne. Buckingham later rebelled against Richard, and some theorize that he may have been the one to arrange for the boy's demise, either to frame Richard or to advance his own distant claim to the throne. Another major suspect is Henry Tudor himself, the man who would become King Henry VII, after defeating Richard at the Battle of Bosworth Field. This theory suggests that the princes may have still been alive, but hidden, when Richard went off to his final battle. When Henry Tudor took the throne, he would have had an equally strong, if not stronger, motive to quietly eliminate the 2 Yorkist princes to secure his own, much weaker claim to the crown. It is a compelling argument, though it lacks direct evidence that the Tudors simply blamed Richard for a crime they themselves had committed. A tantalizing and grim discovery in 1674 adds another layer to the mystery. While workmen were demolishing a staircase within the Tower of London, they unearthed a wooden box containing the skeletons of 2 small children, believing them to be the remains of the lost princes, the reigning king. Charles II had the bones interred with royal honors in Westminster Abbey. In 1933, The skeletons were briefly exhumed and examined, and forensic experts concluded that the ages of the children were consistent with the ages of the two princes. While this discovery offers a likely, but not definitive, answer to what happened to the boys, the question of who gave the order remains fiercely debated. In the end, we are left with a profound and tragic political mystery, a cold case that is over 5 centuries old. Did Richard III, in a ruthless grab for power, commit the ultimate betrayal against his own flesh and blood, as Shakespeare would have us believe, or was he a victim of the propaganda of his enemies, with the truth of the boy's fate being more complex? The Tower of London holds its secrets tightly, and the two young princes remain its most famous and sorrowful ghosts. The vanishing of Malaysia Airlines flight. In our modern hyper-connected world, we have grown accustomed to the idea that nothing is ever truly lost. Every movement is tracked by GPS, every communication is logged, and every corner of the globe is mapped by satellites. This is especially true of modern aviation, a world of constant radar surveillance, transponder signals, and redundant communication systems, a world built on the principle of knowing where everything is, all the time. But on March 8, 2014, this bedrock assumption of our modern age was shattered when a state-of-the-art Boeing 777, carrying 239 souls, vanished from the sky, leaving behind a mystery that would trigger the largest search in history and prove that, even now, the world is still vast enough for something the size of a building to simply disappear. The story begins with the mundane routine of a red-eye flight. Malaysia Airlines Flight 3070 was a scheduled overnight journey from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, to Beijing, China. On board the advanced and reliable Boeing 777 were 27 passengers from 14 different nations and 12 Malaysian crew members. The flight took off just after midnight, climbing into the night sky on its planned route over the South China Sea. For the first 38 minutes, everything was perfectly normal. At 1:19 a.m., as the plane was preparing to leave Malaysian airspace and enter Vietnamese control, the final calm verbal communication was received from the cockpit. A voice, believed to be that of the co-pilot, said, "Good night, Malaysian 370. A few minutes later, as the plane crossed the invisible line into Vietnamese airspace, its transponder, the device that broadcasts the plane's identity, speed, and altitude to civilian air traffic control, was switched off. At that moment, on the radar screens of controllers in both countries, Flight 370 simply blinked out of existence. It had become a ghost. In the initial hours, it was assumed the plane had suffered a sudden and catastrophic failure, perhaps a mid-air explosion or a structural collapse, and had plunged into the South China Sea. An immediate, massive, multinational search was launched along its last known flight path. But as the days went by, a chilling piece of information emerged from Malaysian military radar data. The aircraft had not fallen from the sky, it had turned. In the moments after it vanished from civilian radar, the military had tracked an unidentified aircraft, making a sharp, deliberate turn to the southwest, flying back across the Malay Peninsula and out over the Andaman Sea. The track matched that of MH370. This was a stunning revelation. It meant that the disappearance was not the result of a sudden accident. Someone was still flying the plane, consciously and deliberately taking it far off its intended course. The mystery then entered its third and most perplexing phase. Even with all its main communication systems and its transponder turned off, the aircraft had one last, stubborn link to the outside world. Its satellite data unit, part of the in-flight entertainment system, was still powered on, and for nearly 7 seconds after it vanished from military radar, the unit automatically responded to hourly status requests, or handshakes, from a communications satellite owned by the British company Inmarsat. These signals were never meant for tracking. They contained no GPS data, no speed or altitude information, but they were a lifeline for investigators. Using a revolutionary and complex analysis of these 7 faint electronic whispers, engineers were able to calculate the plane's probable distance from the satellite at the time of each handshake. This allowed them to plot a series of vast arcs on a map representing all the possible locations of the plane at those specific times by calculating the plane's likely speed and fuel endurance. They were able to determine a probable final flight path. The data told a heartbreaking story. The plane had not landed. It had continued to fly south for hours, deep into the remote southern Indian Ocean, one of the most desolate and treacherous stretches of water on the planet. The final handshake was received at 8:19 a.m., consistent with the moment the plane would have finally run out of fuel. The search, which had been focused on the South China Sea, was now shifted to this immense and remote area of the Indian Ocean, a search that would become the largest and most expensive in aviation history. For years, ships and submersible drones scoured a vast, deep-water search zone, but the main wreckage was never found. The only physical proof of the plane's final resting place came in the form of a few confirmed pieces of debris, including a wing flap known as a flaperon that began washing ashore on the coasts of Africa and on islands like Réunion, thousands of miles away, confirming the plane had gone down in the Indian Ocean, but offering no clues as to the exact location. So what happened on board Flight 370? The official investigation explored several possibilities, but no definitive conclusion has ever been reached. One of the leading theories points to a deliberate act by one of the pilots. In this scenario, the captain or the co-pilot, for reasons unknown, locked the other out of the cockpit, disabled the communication systems, and intentionally flew the plane on its long, silent journey to nowhere. An investigation into the captain's home flight simulator found that he had plotted a similar course into the deep southern Indian Ocean, though this is not conclusive proof of intent. Another theory is one of unlawful interference by a hijacker, or even a stowaway who took control of the aircraft. But this theory is weakened by the complete lack of any communication. No demands were ever made, and no group has ever claimed responsibility for the act. The motive for such a complex, silent hijacking remains a complete blank. A third possibility is that the plane suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure, perhaps an onboard fire, or a cascading electrical issue that disabled the communication and navigation systems and incapacitated the crew. This would have created a ghost flight, with the plane continuing to fly on autopilot until it exhausted its fuel. The main argument against this is the deliberate and precise turn back that was observed on military radar, an action that suggests a conscious and skilled pilot was at the controls. We are left with a painful and profound modern mystery. The 23 souls on board, the passengers and crew, vanished along with the aircraft, leaving their families in a state of agonizing uncertainty. The disappearance of MH370 shattered our collective sense of security, proving that even in an age of constant tracking and global connectivity, our world is still vast enough for a 200-foot-long jetliner to simply fly away, leaving behind only a handful of electronic whispers from a satellite high above and an ocean of unanswered questions. The Antwerp diamond heist. In the world of high-stakes crime, there are robberies, and then there are legends. This is the story of a legend, a crime so audacious, so technically brilliant, and so shrouded in mystery that it is known to the world as the heist of the century. It took place in the heart of the global diamond trade, Antwerp, Belgium, where a team of thieves broke into a vault that was designed to be completely impenetrable, a modern-day fortress, and walked away with a fortune, a feat that baffled the world's best security experts and left behind a trail of intrigue and deception that continues to this day. The target was the Antwerp Diamond Center, a building that, in February of 2003, was one of the most secure locations on Earth. The true prize lay 2 floors beneath the main building, in a vault protected by a seemingly insurmountable wall of technology. Its 3-ton steel door was secured by a dual control combination lock, with over 100 million possible combinations, a foot-long key that was impossible to duplicate, and powerful magnetic plates. Inside, the vault was a technological fortress, monitored by Doppler radar seismic sensors that could detect vibrations, infrared heat detectors, and light sensors, For years, the global diamond community had rested easy, secure in the knowledge that the Antwerp vault was absolutely foolproof. The mastermind of the operation was a man named Leonardo Notarbartolo, a charming, professional thief who was a master of the long con. For over 3 years, he had meticulously laid the groundwork for the heist. He rented an office in the diamond center itself, posing as a legitimate Italian diamond merchant, a position that gave him a security pass and priceless inside access. He spent years observing the building's routines, studying the security systems, noting the locations of cameras, and building a reputation as a friendly, unremarkable businessman, all while secretly taking photographs and planning one of the most ambitious thefts in history. For his crew, he assembled a small team of specialists from Italy, each with a particular skill, a group known in the criminal underworld as the School of Turin. The heist took place over the weekend of February 15th, 2003, a time when the Diamond Center would be quiet. It was a masterpiece of patient, methodical execution. The crew first bypassed the building's main security and then made their way down to the vault antechamber. They used a custom-made polyester shield to block the powerful magnetic plates that secured the door, a feat that required precise engineering. They then used a can of hairspray to temporarily blind the heat and light sensors, a simple but brilliant trick. The greatest mystery, however, was how they opened the vault door itself, a door that required both a complex combination and a unique, foot-long key. Notarbartolo would later claim they had practiced for months on a full-scale replica of the vault, and that they had somehow obtained a duplicate of the supposedly unduplicatable key. Once inside the vault, they worked for hours in the darkness, their movements carefully planned to avoid tripping the seismic sensors in the floor. They broke into 23 of the 60 safe deposit boxes, emptying them of their contents, a glittering haul of loose diamonds, gold, silver, jewelry, and cash. When they were finished, they took the security tapes from the video recorder to erase any trace of their presence and made a clean getaway. The crime was so perfect that it was not discovered until the following Monday morning, when merchants arrived to find their safe deposit boxes empty. The scene left investigators speechless. The world's most secure vault had been defeated. For a crime of such genius, it was a moment of simple, human error that brought it all crashing down. One of the crew members, a man nicknamed Speedy, was tasked with burning a bag of incriminating evidence after the heist. Overcome with a panic attack, he failed to do so, and instead just dumped the bag on the side of a highway outside of Brussels. A local landowner discovered the partially burned bag and, looking inside, found a half-eaten salami sandwich, diamond invoices, and handwritten notes that detailed the security of the Diamond Center. He called the police, and DNA recovered from the sandwich was quickly matched to none other than Leonardo Notarbartolo, the friendly Italian diamond merchant. Notarbartolo was arrested, tried, and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Most of his crew was also eventually identified and apprehended. The case seemed to be closed, but two things were missing: the vast majority of the loot, valued by authorities at over $100 million, and the truth: the diamonds were never, ever found. After his release from prison, Notarbartolo began to talk, and he told a story that was even more incredible than the heist itself. He claimed that the official story was a lie. He alleged that he and his crew were hired by a major diamond merchant to commit the robbery as part of a massive, complex insurance fraud scheme. He claimed the true value of the goods in the vault was only around $20 million, and that many of the face deposit boxes were empty, their owners having deliberately removed their diamonds beforehand as part of the scam. According to Notarbartolo, the heist was not a brilliant break-in, it was a controlled entry. He claimed the merchant provided them with the vault's combination, disabled some of the security systems remotely, and left the vault door partially open for them. He says they were then double-crossed, paid only a fraction of their fee, and that the half-eaten sandwich was deliberately left behind to ensure he would be caught, taking the fall for a much larger crime. This shocking claim has never been substantiated, and it could simply be the elaborate excuse of a convicted master thief, but it casts a permanent shadow of doubt over the entire case. How did the crew really bypass the vault's legendary security? Was it through their own genius, or was it an inside job? Where are the diamonds? Are they hidden in a secret location, known only to Notarbartolo? Or were they immediately handed over to the shadowy merchant, who allegedly orchestrated the whole affair? And was Notarbartolo the true mastermind, or just a pawn in a much larger game of deception within the secretive world of the diamond trade? The Antwerp diamond heist remains a crime that exists on two levels. On one hand, it is the story of a brilliant and audacious physical robbery, a testament to meticulous planning and daring execution. But on its deeper, more mysterious level, it is a tale of a potential conspiracy, a perfect crime that may have been designed to fail from the very beginning. The vault was breached, the thieves were caught, but the diamonds, and perhaps the real truth of what happened that weekend, remain at large. The Taos Ho. We often think of silence as an absence, a state of perfect quiet. But for some people, in certain places around the world, that silence is broken by a sound that no one else can hear, a persistent, maddening, and mysterious low-frequency hum. The most famous of these acoustic enigmas comes from the small, artistic desert town of Taos, New Mexico, a place known for its tranquil beauty and profound quiet, a quiet that for a select few has been shattered by an invisible and untraceable noise. The phenomenon, which gained widespread attention in the early 1990s, is known as the Taos hum. It is described by those who can hear it, often called hearers or hummers, as a persistent, low-frequency buzzing or droning sound, often compared to the sound of a diesel engine idling in the distance. It is a sound that is not just heard, but felt, a vibration that seems to permeate everything. The most baffling aspect of the hum is its selectivity. Only a small fraction of the population in the area, estimated at around 2%, can perceive it. This has made the experience incredibly isolating for the hearers, who for years were often dismissed by friends, family, and even doctors who could find nothing wrong with their hearing and could not perceive the sound themselves. The hum was a private torment, a ghost in the auditory system. The effects on those who can hear it are significant and distressing. Hearers have reported a range of symptoms, including headaches, nausea, dizziness, pressure in the ears, and severe sleep disturbances. The psychological toll is immense, with many reporting feelings of intense frustration, anxiety, and desperation to escape a sound that follows them everywhere. Paradoxically, the hum is often reported to be louder indoors than outdoors, and it is most noticeable at night, when the background noise of the world fades away. While the Taos hum is the most famous, it is not a unique phenomenon. Similar unexplained localized hums have been reported in other parts of the world, creating a global mystery. There is the Bristol hum in England, the Windsor hum in Ontario, Canada, and the Bondi hum in Sydney, Australia, each with its own community of hearers and its own frustrating search for a source. In the 1990s, the complaints from Taos residents became so numerous that a formal scientific investigation was launched. A team of researchers from the University of New Mexico, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and other institutions descended on the town. Armed with a battery of sophisticated equipment, they set up sensitive sound level meters, geothermal sensors to detect vibrations from the earth, and detectors for electromagnetic fields, hoping to finally capture and identify the elusive sound. The investigation was a study in frustration. The highly sensitive microphones and acoustic equipment could not detect any single, persistent sound that matched the descriptions of the hum. There was no acoustic or vibrational source, no single factory, military installation, or power line that could be definitively identified as the culprit. The hum, it seemed, was acoustically invisible to their instruments. The only significant clue the investigation uncovered was about the hearers themselves. Testing revealed that some of the individuals who reported the hum had an unusually acute sense of hearing able to perceive sounds at frequencies far lower than the average person. But this discovery only deepened the mystery. It may explain who can hear the sound, but it does not explain what the sound is, or where it is coming from. In the absence of a clear answer, numerous theories have been proposed. The most straightforward explanation is industrial noise, that the hum is the byproduct of large fans, compressors, or machinery from a local factory or a distant military operation, but no specific source has ever been pinpointed, and the sound reportedly persists even when local industries are known to be shut down. Another leading theory is that the hum is not an external sound at all, but a specific form of tinnitus, a medical condition that creates a perception of sound where no external source exists. The main argument against this is the remarkable consistency of the sound described by unrelated people in the same geographic area, and the fact that some hearers claim they can lessen the sound by moving to a different location, something that should not be possible if the source is internal. More complex theories point to the Earth itself. Some researchers believe the hum could be generated by low-frequency seismic activity, or microseisms, the constant, tiny vibrations of the planet's crust. The unique geology of the Rio Grande Rift Valley, where Taos is situated, might amplify these vibrations in a way that makes them perceptible to a sensitive hue. Another scientific theory points to the sky, suggesting the hum could be caused by the interaction of very low frequency, or VLF, radio waves with the human ear. These powerful radio waves, used by the military for long-range communication, especially with submarines, could, in theory, create a perceptible sound in a small number of people under the right conditions. The Taos hum remains a frustrating and deeply personal mystery, a phenomenon that exists on the very edge of human perception. Is it a real, physical sound that our current technology is simply not yet sensitive enough to isolate? Or is it a complex psychoacoustic illusion, a ghost in our own auditory system? For the hearers in Taos and around the world, the question is not academic. It is a constant, maddening presence, an unexplained noise that has turned the desert silence into a source of endless torment. The assassination of Olof Palme. In the collective imagination, Sweden has long been seen as a bastion of peace, progress, and social tranquility, a nation so safe and open that its leaders could live like ordinary citizens. It was a country that seemed immune to the political violence that plagued so much of the world. But on a cold winter's night in 1986, that cherished sense of innocence was irrevocably shattered when its Prime Minister Olof Palme was taken from his country on a busy Stockholm street, an act that plunged Sweden into its largest and most frustrating criminal investigation in history. Olof Palme was a towering figure in Swedish politics, a two-time Prime Minister and the leader of the Social Democratic Party. He was a charismatic and eloquent statesman, but also a deeply polarizing figure on the world stage, known for his fierce criticism of both the United States' involvement in Vietnam and the Soviet Union's occupation of Afghanistan. He was a man with many powerful admirers and just as many powerful enemies. Yet, he was also a man who embodied the Swedish ideal of an open society. He frequently chose to live without the protective bubble of a security detail, preferring to move about freely. On the evening of Friday, February 28, 1986, Palme made a characteristically casual decision. He dismissed his bodyguards for the day, and on a whim, he and his wife, Lisbeth, decided to go to the cinema with their son and his girlfriend. After the film, the couples parted ways, and Olof and Lisbeth began their leisurely walk home, alone, through the well-lit and bustling streets of central Stockholm. It was a scene of perfect, ordinary domesticity, a prime minister and his wife strolling home after a movie. Just after 11:20, as they crossed the Sveavägen, one of the city's main streets, a tall man dressed in a dark coat appeared from behind them. The exact sequence of events is debated, but at that moment, a shocking act of violence occurred. The perpetrator used a powerful handgun at close range. Olof Palme fell to the pavement, his passing almost instantaneous. A second projectile grazed his wife Lisbeth's back. The assailant then calmly turned, ran down a side street, and vanished into the network of alleyways, leaving behind a scene of chaos and a nation in disbelief. The immediate aftermath was a study in confusion that would cripple the investigation from its very first moments. The crime scene was not properly secured, allowing horrified but well-meaning bystanders to walk through and contaminate potential evidence. The initial police response was disorganized, and a comprehensive search for the perpetrator was slow to get underway. The weapon, believed by investigators to be a .357 Magnum revolver, was never found, a crucial piece of missing evidence that would haunt the case for decades. What followed was one of the largest and longest-running criminal investigations in world history, a sprawling, labyrinthine case that has filled hundreds of meters of shelf space with files on endless theories and suspects. The first, and for a long time only person, ever convicted for the act was a man named Christer Pettersson, a local misfit with a long history of substance use and a prior conviction for taking a life. Lisbeth Palm identified him from a police lineup that was later heavily criticized as being deeply flawed and suggestive. Pettersson was convicted in 1989, but the verdict was swiftly overturned on appeal. The court found that while Lisbeth's testimony was compelling, there was a complete lack of any technical evidence. There was no confession, no motive, and no weapon. Pettersson would remain the most famous suspect, a convenient but ultimately unproven answer to a national trauma. The investigation explored a dizzying array of other possibilities. For years, the police were fixated on the theory that the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, a Kurdish separatist group that Sweden had recently designated as a terrorist organization, was responsible. This lead consumed immense resources, but was eventually discredited. Another compelling theory pointed to the South African apartheid regime. Olof Palme was one of the world's most powerful and vocal critics of apartheid, and this theory suggests that South African security agents, or a third party hired by them, carried out the act to silence him. For 34 years, the case remained officially open and unsolved, a deep and painful wound on the Swedish national psyche. Then, in June of 2020, the Swedish prosecutor's office held a press conference to announce a stunning development. They were officially closing the case because they believed they had identified the responsible party. The man they named was not a foreign agent or a career criminal, but a Swedish graphic designer named Stig Engström. Engström, who became known as the Skandia Man because he had been working late at the nearby Skandia insurance company headquarters, had been one of the first eyewitnesses on the scene. He was interviewed by police multiple times in the early days of the investigation, but was quickly dismissed as an unreliable and attention-seeking witness. The prosecutors, however, pieced together a compelling circumstantial case against him. Engström's own account of his movements that night was inconsistent and seemed to place him at the scene at the exact moment of the event. He was known to have a strong dislike for Olof Palme's political views. He had access to firearms through a collector friend, and his clothing matched the description given by several other eyewitnesses. The prosecutor's theory is that Engström, possibly acting on his own, committed the act and then deliberately inserted himself into the investigation as a confused eyewitness to throw the police off his trail. Because Engström had taken his own life in the year 2000, he could not be prosecuted, and the evidence against him, while intriguing, remains entirely circumstantial. The closing of the case provided an official end, but not a satisfying conclusion for many Swedes. It remains a national trauma, a symbol of a lost age of innocence, and a powerful story of how a single, violent act on a quiet city street can leave a country with a wound that never truly heals. The question of who took Olof Palme's life and why continues to echo through the streets of Stockholm. The mystery of dark matter. Look up at the night sky and imagine everything you can see. Every star, every planet, every distant, swirling galaxy, and every glowing nebula. Now, imagine all the things you can't see, the asteroids, the rogue planets, the cold dust between the stars, and the black holes. Imagine all of that, everything that makes up our tangible observable universe. And understand this, all of it, together, accounts for only 5% of what is actually out there. The other 95% of the cosmos is a complete and total mystery, a vast, invisible universe that governs the shape and fate of everything we can see. This invisible cosmos is made of two enigmatic components, the first of which is a substance known as dark matter, and the search to understand it is the single greatest puzzle in all of modern physics. The first major clue that something was profoundly wrong with our understanding of the universe came from the work of an American astronomer named Vera Rubin in the 1970s. She was studying the rotation of galaxies, specifically the Andromeda galaxy, and she expected to find something very simple and intuitive, just like in our solar system, where the inner planets move fast and the outer planets move slowly. She expected to see the stars on the outer edges of the galaxy moving much more slowly than the stars near the bright, dense center where most of the visible mass is. What she found, however, was shocking, and it defied the known laws of gravity. The stars on the very outer edges of the galaxy were moving just as fast, if not faster, than the stars in the middle. The galaxies were spinning so fast that based on all the stars and gas we could see, they should have torn themselves apart, with their outer stars flying off into the void of intergalactic space. The gravitational pull of the visible matter was not nearly enough to hold them together. The only way to explain this was to conclude that there had to be a massive, invisible halo of some unknown substance surrounding each and every galaxy, providing the extra gravitational glue needed to keep them intact. This unseen, mysterious mass, which was not emitting any light, was given a simple and fitting name: dark matter. Vera Rubin's observations provided the first powerful evidence that the universe was not what it seemed. Since then, other independent lines of evidence have confirmed this bizarre conclusion. The most powerful of these comes from a phenomenon predicted by Albert Einstein known as gravitational lensing. His theory of general relativity tells us that massive objects bend the very fabric of space-time, and this can, in turn, bend the path of light from distant objects as it travels towards us, a cosmic magnifying glass. Astronomers now regularly observe the light from distant galaxies being warped, magnified, and distorted in ways that cannot possibly be explained by the visible matter in the foreground. The amount of gravitational lensing they see is far too great, but when they calculate the effect of a massive, invisible halo of dark matter, the numbers match perfectly. We cannot see the dark matter itself, but we can clearly see the gravitational footprint it leaves on the light that travels through it. So, what is this strange, ghostly substance? The most important thing to understand is what it is not. It is not just dark clouds of normal matter. It is not made of protons, neutrons, and electrons like the stars, the planets, and ourselves. We know this because we would be able to detect that kind of matter in other ways, like through the absorption of light passing through it. Dark matter appears to be something else entirely. It is dark because it does not seem to interact with light or any other form of electromagnetic radiation in any way. It does not absorb, reflect, or emit light, making it completely invisible to all of our telescopes. Its only known interaction with the universe we can see is through the silent, persistent pull of its gravity. It is a cosmic ghost, a substance whose presence is felt but never seen. The leading candidates for what dark matter could be are a class of hypothetical particles known as WIMPs, or weakly interacting massive particles. These are thought to be heavy, slow-moving particles that were created in the extreme heat of the Big Bang and have been drifting through the cosmos ever since, not interacting with us, except through gravity and the weak nuclear force. Scientists around the world have built incredibly sensitive experiments deep underground in shielded laboratories designed to detect the faint, telltale ping of a single WIMP particle bouncing off a nucleus of a regular atom. So far, these massive and expensive experiments have found nothing, leaving the nature of dark matter as mysterious as ever. Of course, there is another, more radical possibility. What if there is no dark matter at all, and our understanding of gravity itself is simply wrong on the cosmic scale? This is the idea behind a theory known as modified Newtonian dynamics, or MUN, which proposes that gravity behaves differently over vast distances than it does in our solar system. While this theory can explain the rotation of galaxies, it struggles to account for other evidence like gravitational lensing. The search for dark matter is one of the most profound and active quests in all of science. The startling truth is that the vast majority of the matter in our universe is a complete mystery, a silent, invisible scaffold upon which the shining galaxies we can see are built. We live in a cosmos whose true nature is mostly hidden from us, a universe that is held together by a ghostly substance we have never seen and do not understand, a silent presence whose gravity is the only thing keeping our own Milky Way from flying apart. The legend of the Golem of Prague. In the heart of Europe lies the city of Prague, a place of ancient spires, cobblestone streets, and a deep, mystical history. In the late 16th century, during the reign of the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II, Prague was a global center of arts, science, alchemy, and esoteric thought. And at the heart of this vibrant city was the Jewish ghetto, a walled-in community that was both a cradle of intense culture and a frequent target of persecution. It is from this world of scholarly brilliance and simmering fear that one of the most powerful and enduring legends of Jewish folklore was born, the tale of a giant, artificial man, sculpted from clay and brought to life by sacred magic, a silent, tireless protector known as the Golem of Prague. The central figure in this legend is a real historical person, Rabbi Judah Loeb ben Bezalel, known to the world as the Maharal of Prague. He was the chief rabbi and spiritual leader of the city's Jewish community in the late 1500s, a renowned scholar, philosopher, and a master of the mystical traditions of the Kabbalah, a man of immense intellect and deep faith. The story is set against the grim backdrop of the blood libel, the false and horrific accusation that Jewish people were ending the lives of Christian children to use their blood in religious rituals. This vicious lie was often used as a pretext to incite violent mobs and pogroms against the Jewish ghettos of Europe. According to the legend, Rabbi Loeb, seeing his community living in constant terror, prayed for a way to protect his people. In a divine vision, he was given a secret formula for the creation of a golem, a being from Hebrew folklore, an artificial man animated by sacred rites. The legend says that in the dead of night, Rabbi Loeb took 2 assistants to the banks of the Latava River, and there, using the wet clay from the riverbed, they sculpted the form of a large and powerful man. They then began a complex Kabbalistic ritual, walking around the clay figure while chanting sacred Hebrew names and incantations. The final, crucial step was to give the golem the spark of life. In most versions of the tale, Rabbi Loeb placed a piece of parchment with a Shem, a sacred name of God, into the golem's mouth, or inscribed the Hebrew word emet, meaning truth, onto its forehead. At that moment, the clay figure's eyes opened. It rose from the ground, a silent, powerful, and living being. The golem, often named Yosef, became the tireless guardian of the Prague ghetto. Its primary purpose was to patrol the narrow streets at night, a silent sentinel protecting the community from intruders and uncovering plots against them. It was a being of immense physical strength, capable of performing great feats of labor, but it was not a true human. It had no soul, no free will, and it could not speak. It was a purely functional, literal-minded automaton. This literal-mindedness sometimes led to trouble. Stories are told of the Rebbe's wife asking the golem to perform simple chores, like filling the water barrels, only to return home to find the house completely flooded, as the golem, having been given no instruction to stop, continued to pour water until the barrels overflowed. The golem was a powerful tool, but a dangerous one that needed to be controlled. A crucial part of this control was the Sabbath, the Jewish day of rest. On every Friday evening before sunset, Rabbi Loeb would deactivate the golem by removing the sacred Shem from its mouth, allowing the creature to rest as lifeless clay. The most famous part of the legend tells of one Friday evening when the rabbi, preoccupied with preparing for the Sabbath services, forgot. The golem, still animated, went on a destructive rampage through the ghetto, threatening to destroy everything. Rabbi Lo had to rush from the synagogue to confront the creature and remove the Shem, finally rendering it inert. According to the legend, after the golem had successfully protected the community from numerous threats, the Emperor Rudolph II finally issued a decree promising to end the persecution of the Jewish people. With its purpose served, and having grown wary of the creature's immense power, Rabbi Lo decided that the golem was no longer needed. He and his assistants led the golem to the attic of the old new synagogue, the heart of the community, and there they reversed the creation ritual. By erasing the first letter from the word emet, or truth, inscribed on its forehead, the word became met, the Hebrew word for death. At that moment, the golem's life force drained away, and it crumbled back into a lifeless statue of hard clay. Its remains were then sealed in the synagogue's attic, or janazah, a place for storing worn-out holy texts, and a strict prohibition was placed upon anyone ever entering the attic again. This is the core of the enduring mystery. Does the golem of Prague still lie dormant and hidden in that dusty, sealed attic? For centuries, the legend has persisted. It is said that a Nazi agent who tried to enter the attic during the Second World War perished in the attempt. In modern times, the attic has been explored by researchers and even a television crew who found only old books and dust, but this has done little to diminish the power of the story for believers. The Golem of Prague is one of the most powerful and influential tales in all of folklore, a story born from a community's desperate need for a protector in a time of great fear. But it is also a profound and surprisingly modern allegory, a story about the relationship between a creator and their creation, and a cautionary tale about the dangers of artificial intelligence, a power that, once unleashed, can be difficult to control. The legend remains a cornerstone of Prague's mystical identity, a timeless story of faith, fear, and the powerful magic of bringing clay to life. This was the video.